we had a presentation about this museum. This is the Cook Museum in Decatur about 2 years ago, before they had completed the building of the museum. And as an architect, I was pretty impressed by what I saw. And as a person who's always been interested in science, I was pretty impressed by the scope of what they were trying to do. So last summer, when my two oldest grandchildren were visiting, my wife and I took them and went to Decatur and signed up to be charter members of the museum. And I was even more impressed by the actuality than I was by the presentation. One of my grandchildren was 12 at the time, and the other was 9.5. They both had a good time seeing the museum, and the 9.5-year-old pretended that he wasn't very interested. But the next 3 days, he kept asking questions and talking about what he had seen there. So I'm sure that they both really enjoyed it. And we will be back the next time they're in town when we can go. I think all of you have seen Scott's bio background. Jim Teepeepaw attached it to the invitation to the meeting, but I will try to hit the highlights. Scott Mayo was named the executive director of the Cook Museum in October of 2019. He oversees the operations of the region's newest tourist attraction, and it is an educational tourist attraction, which is pretty common in North Alabama, but unusual in the general scheme of tourist attractions. Before he was appointed to be the director of the museum, Scott completed 16 years as headmaster of Decatur Heritage Christian Academy. He provided educational oversight, physical management, and primary fundraising leadership. And he was also the teacher of economics for the seniors. The school raised over $14 million in capital funding while he was in charge there. Scott's been involved in the community through serving on boards of quite a few organizations in Decatur. And he and his wife, Donna, are members of the Decatur Presbyterian Church. Outside of work, he's an avid outdoorsman, a voracious reader, and a coach for track and field, and a devoted grandfather. Scott, I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, guys. Thank y'all so much for having me here today to, at least virtually, to talk to you a little bit about the Cook Museum. Greetings from the Cook Museum of Natural Science. As was mentioned in my intro, just last week was my 1-year anniversary here at the museum after spending a total of 26 years in education. In hindsight, I think I picked a real good time to retire from education. However, I'm now thinking maybe I jumped out of the frying pan of education into the fire of the museum world. You know, with everybody else in the world, we're dealing with mandatory closures, public unease in general, huge impact on tourism, and obviously no school field trips at this point in time. But misery does not love company. So I'm not here today to tell you how hard it is to be a museum in these times. I am going to talk about some good stuff. I'm going to talk today about 3 things, all the great things that happened when we opened. You know, I'd heard that it was even prior to our opening when you guys heard from us last. So I'm going to take you to some of the thought process right up to the opening, the things that happened when we opened. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunities we had to excel during the shutdown. I mean, it was a tough time, but there were some things that occurred during that time and because of that time that really allowed us to step up. And then I want to talk a little bit as I close about the ways we've hit the ground running since then. All right, grand opening, way back June 7th, 2019, but that was a day long in the making. Way back in 2011, the decision was made to relocate and expand the Cook's Museum of Natural Science, which is what the museum that had been over here since the 80s was called. It was on 4th Avenue. Much smaller locality, but it was the Cook's Museum of Natural Science. The building was dated and aged, and there was a decision made let's do something with this. Let's complete the legacy of Mr. Cook. And so the decision was made, 2011. Well, from 2011 to 2019, obviously a lot happened. Some aspects of that process were much easier than others, such as, I don't know, the name change, going from Cook's Natural Science Museum to the Cook Museum of Natural Science. That was easy. Other aspects were considerably harder, mainly centered around the fact that at the time when they decided to relocate and expand, they didn't really define the term expand. And when you leave that open-ended, you can get into all kind of fun things. What happened was the vision for the museum, what it could be and what it should be, continued to grow and grow and grow. It went from a relocation and a renovation of an existing building that was on the site we are now to a full-blown, ground-up construction project with a growing real-time scope as we saw more opportunities and more opportunities and more opportunities. You mentioned the architects. Our architects, Fuquay & Associates, were involved. Our general contractor, Fite Building Company. Look, they did a great job, but it did remind me of that cartoon, the boat cartoon, to where you've got a giant yacht with a small rowboat sitting on the deck. And the name on the back of the rowboat is contract. And the name on the back of the yacht is change order. And that was a very grand part of what we did. That expanded vision as we went along, yes, it led to an expanded investment of funds, but it also led to an expanded time frame for construction. Well, where we ended up was so much more functional, so much more engaging, so much more representative of our theme, Life is Amazing, than what was originally envisioned. You know, kind of a early midpoint idea was about a $17 million project. Where we ended up was a $35 million state-of-the-art museum. That would not have been possible, and I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit throughout the outpouring of support from this entire region from donors. We raised over $22 million for the initial capital campaign to help fund that $35 million project, and it was incredible. Now, I'm using the possessive pronouns a lot, us and we and me. You read my bio, I was not actually on the payroll at that point in time, but I would like to say I was involved. Our volunteer manager, Bill Nelson, was making the tour of all the civic organizations in town way back in the summer of 2018. He came to the organization of which I'm a part. He spoke a little bit about the great need the museum was going to have for volunteers. And I didn't know any better but to take him seriously. So I called him and I said, hey, man, I'd love to volunteer at the museum. I love bugs. I love snakes. I love turtles. Man, I'm an outdoor guy. Can I get involved with the animal side of things? And Bill said, absolutely. I went down, jumped through some hoops, had a background check, had a physical, all that you got to do to be a volunteer. And next thing you know, I'm down here during the summertime with school out. I was down here about 6 hours a week. Once school started again in the fall, I was down here 2 hours on a Monday morning before school started, feeding crickets to lizards and watering the carnivorous plants and cleaning the rat cages. Not my most favorite thing to do, but you know, you got to start from somewhere. So I was involved as a volunteer well before they were open. And I guess that could be a rags to riches story of, you know, even a volunteer can grow to be the executive director one day. So that just kind of worked out. Anyway, so I was involved, but I wasn't obviously on the payroll on that day, June 7th, 2019, when we finally opened the doors. And we finally got a chance to live out that mission to engage, excite, and educate visitors of all ages about the natural created world around us. Well, we had great crowds that entire summer. I mean, it was just phenomenal. Our first fall, obviously, was going to be our first fall for school field trips. We began to schedule those in earnest mid-December. We got through the end of that first partial, we got to the end of the calendar year, which is a partial operational year for us, June through December, just over 77,000 guests. We got to January and February of 2020. Those were strong as well. We continue to add more special programming, more classes, more field trips, more promotions, more corporate sales. But we were a startup in so many different phases of that word. And what did we learn? You know, you can plan, and we did. As a startup, we did all the things startups should do. We hired consultants. We conducted focus groups. We hired good people to have expertise on staff. We leaned on the textbooks and industry averages for tourism and for museums. So based on all that, we made assumptions, we made projections, and then we made plans based on those assumptions and projections, which is, again, what every startup has to do. Once you open the doors, though, the unique reality hits for this unique project in this unique demographic, and you start to learn some things that you really couldn't have known until you opened up. Things like we discovered unanticipated choke points as the crowd flowed through the museum. We realized we needed some serious tweaks to the acoustics in some areas. You know, we thought this many kids on this many field trips can fit into this amount of time, and we quickly found out that was not the case. Yeah, they took much longer. We thought this particular exhibit was indestructible, and once we put a kid load on it, we quickly found out it ain't indestructible. All things that you just had to open up and hit the ground running before you knew for a fact how real some of those assumptions and projections were. And so then what you do is you remain flexible. You make changes, you alter plans, you go in a different direction. Now, some of those improvements, some of those enhancements were on the physical plant, even inside the exhibit space, which wasn't a huge problem to begin with, because initially we were closed on Mondays, which is pretty standard. You know, you're open on the weekends, you're open Tuesday through Friday, you get the great crowds, and you close on Monday to do all your maintenance, and it allows the animals to have a day rest. And that was working great. We were able to keep up with the load until we got out to January, and our group sales department told us that they have run out of dates for scheduling field trips. Well, since there's only 180 days in the school year, and we sure don't want to already be telling schools no, I'm a big fan of turning no's into yeses. So lo and behold, we did end up opening on Mondays. We quickly filled those new days with field trips. And what we did with maintenance and improvements is those moved to off hours. We would have a crew ready at 5:05 on a Monday afternoon, and they would work through the night, and they would finish up in time to clean up at 9 o'clock the next morning when we opened the doors. It allowed those changes to be made in a seamless manner, but there were certain things you just couldn't do in an overnight like this. So our list of improvements that we desired to make got longer, but man, we wanted to get field trips in here. Speaking of field trips, one of the things we learned as our group sales got out and we started contacting kids and superintendents and principals, we learned that there were a number of schools having trouble fitting us into their field trip budget. Well, our development department that had done such a stellar job on the capital funding side of the equation now jumped into the annual fund side of the equation, raising money for the operational side. And one of the key things that they jumped on initially were raising money for scholarships, for funds to help these schools either to subsidize or fully pay for these schools that couldn't afford it to come to the museum. In just a few short months, they raised over $116,000 in scholarship funds to supplement these schools. You know, those dollars are coming from individuals, from businesses, from foundations. One group I do want to highlight that has stepped up just in a great way are our local legislative delegation across all of North Alabama. They're supporting the students and schools in their districts. And that's just been a marvelous thing. And kids that just weren't going to be able to come are now able to drive in, afford the buses and afford the entrance, and come in and have the experience here with everybody else. So this was all great stuff. We were learning, we were adjusting, we were adding to our visitor experience, we were enhancing access. During that time, we did win a couple of awards right off the bat. We were the Gold Award winner for technology in gallery installations, which is a mouthful, at the Southeast Museums Conference for our Holo Sands table, which everybody that comes here calls it our sand table. It is an absolute crowd favorite. It is an amazing thing. I can't even describe it to you. You would actually have to come experience. It is one of the few places in the museum where kids cry because the moms will say we have to move on to allow someone else to play with it. And, you know, they'll cry till they see the next cool thing. But it is just such a crowd magnet. And it was nice to have gotten recognition in the museum world for a gold medal for that particular exhibit. Secondly, through a concerted effort and through all our friends in North Alabama, we actually finished second in the nation in the balloting on the USA Today 10 Best New Museums Reader's Choice in 2020. And that was a great recognition amongst some other phenomenal museums across the country and attractions across the country. And we were so pleased at the outpouring of support. Just the balloting itself raised a lot of awareness for us. And we were thrilled that the people stepped up and voted for us there. So there we were engaging, we were exciting, we were educating, adding to classes, expanding field trips, winning awards. At the end of February, we were just shy of 100,000 visitors. We projected to finish our first full year of operation somewhere in the 125,000, 130,000 range, which was phenomenal. And things were going great. And then we got to March. And like everybody else in March, we started watching and trying to figure out what this was going to mean for us. That first week of March, good week for the museum, we hosted a Leadership Alabama event in Monarch Hall, which is our largest, most opulent meeting space we've got here. That went great. Crowds were still good. Field trips were here. Heading into that second weekend, we had a very large wedding reception that was going to be in that same space. We also, that Saturday, we had one of our fun days. And fun days are special Saturdays where we have a lot of extra activities on site, million things to do. And we were wondering, are we going to be able to pull this off? Well, we watched that week as that week progressed. During that week, a number of institutions like us were starting to make closure plans. We're actually starting to close. By Friday, and if I'm not wrong, I believe Space and Rocket announced their closure on Friday. Well, we opened up Saturday, we hosted the wedding, we had the fun day, and our crowd that day was 300 individuals. Now, to give you a little context, our previous fun days had been between 1,500 and 1,800 individuals. So obviously COVID had arrived in North Alabama, if not in person, at least in the cloud that preceded the in-person. And just like everybody else, that Friday when we shut the doors, that was it for us for a while. At that point, on a voluntary basis. You guys know shortly after that, Governor Ivey made the announcement that it was no longer on a voluntary basis. Entertainment venues, of which museums are a part, we were in that batch, and we were closed by state order at that point in time. I think back that day, just being geared up for a big crowd, and it was kind of a skeleton group of guests that were here. I mean, the day felt surreal. Looking back on it now, it still feels surreal. It made me think of that great philosopher, Bob Seger, who had that quote in his song, "I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then." Had you told me then that it would have taken as long as it did to get back up and running and what it would have looked like now, I'm glad I didn't know that, because I'm not sure what I would have done with it. But here we go. I'll go back to where I started. I said no whining today. So I'm not going to talk. I'm going to talk about the positives. All right. So as mentioned earlier, we were shut down. Actually, for us, we were shut down a grand total of 4 months. Part of that was mandatory and part of that was voluntary on our part. As I mentioned earlier, we had a number of projects. The project list had grown of construction type things we wanted to do to make things better, to re-engineer some things, many of which were going to take more than one night, many of which were going to create actually a mess that at least aesthetically would have been problematic to have tried to done while we were open. Well, man, we just made a dust cover over it and went to work. And some of those projects took 6 and 8 weeks that we worked on, but we were able to get in there and get those done in a way we couldn't have, and certainly wouldn't have chosen to shut down to make those improvements. So, if you're looking for a silver lining, hey, if you're closed, at least you can do some construction. Secondly, and this is no different than every other organization in the world during this period of time, the economic reality of months of closure with no revenue, that certainly focused our attention. So we did restructure just a wee little bit. We tried to right size for what we thought was going to be an anticipated new reality. Some tough decisions were made, just like everybody else, but they were made easier, if possible, in a sense, because those decisions were forced upon us, as opposed to this just being us being Ebenezer Scrooge and deciding to tighten up the purse strings this was a reality for everyone, and everybody understood it. And there were some mainly personnel issues that were just tough, but these were calls that we had to make. We came through it. What I do believe now that we've reopened is being right-sized. I'm incredibly proud of the crew we've got left and the way they pulled together. So that allowed us to do some things that maybe we needed to have done anyway, based on some unrealistic expectations and assumptions we made prior to opening. Now that we had opened, we maybe did need to thin up just a little bit, and we've done that now. Now, the most fun thing to talk to you about is during the closure, kale happened. And I don't mean the vegetable. Kale is the name of our Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. It is the most endangered species of sea turtle in the world. We put in a request for a sea turtle very early on once we opened up. We have got a phenomenal animal care team. It's a staff of over 10 folks. We have got a phenomenal veterinarian on call and on retainer with the museum. He also is on call and retainer with the Chattanooga Aquarium. So just a phenomenal set of resources. It allowed us to be seen as proficient and worthy to receive one of these turtles. And lo and behold, during the closure, we got the call. The call came in from the Virginia Aquarium. At the Virginia Aquarium, they do rescues. They'll do a couple hundred rescues a year. This particular turtle was a juvenile, they think 3 to 4 years old. He had been accidentally hooked by a fisherman on a fishing pier on the peninsula side of Virginia over by Maryland. They brought him to the museum. The fish hook was down in his throat. They tried to remove it endoscopically and could not get it out. So they ended up having to do some cutting to get it out. Once they had done that, that particular wound where they had to go in to make the surgery, it didn't heal up the way they wanted it to heal up. Hence, at the end of the process, they had him for about 4 months. They decided that he was not going to be releasable, which means he could be adopted by an aquarium, a museum such as ours. And again, we got the phone call. Now, the phone call was the beginning of the journey. You've got to jump through a bunch of hoops paperwork-wise, even at that point. You've actually got to go retrieve the turtle. You've got to bring him back. You've got to quarantine him. You've got to then acclimate him to his permanent home. Once you've acclimated him, then you can finally announce that you've got him, because bad things can happen during that period of time. Then you can show him off to people. Well, we were able to do every bit of that and keep it a secret because we were closed, which allowed us, when Governor Ivey made the announcement that we could, that entertainment venues, museums such as ours could reopen in June. We weren't quite finished with that process with him yet. And we had a couple of construction things we were doing. So we jumped up, we reopened our cafe, the Nature's Table Cafe we have here at the museum. We reopened the museum store so that we were open, and we started promoting the fact that we had a secret. We kept it a little secret. We hinted around for a few days, and then we let everybody know that, man, when we reopen here in a few short weeks, you guys come back out, it is going to be something to see. And we were able to reveal kale to the world when we reopened early June. And man, it was just phenomenal. It was just neat seeing people beeline through. We had kids skipping the sand table to run to the ocean exhibit to see our sea turtle. Kale added to the number. He is now our 4th endangered or threatened species we have here at the museum, along with the diamondback terrapin, the indigo snake, and the hellbenders. So it just adds to us getting the word out on conservation on these endangered and threatened species. And man, we could not be more thrilled. He is a great looking turtle. As I mentioned, he's young. These turtles tend to live 50 years plus in captivity. He's going to be it's a small species, never more than about 2 feet across, less than 100 pounds, which means he can stay in our aquarium his entire life. Had we gotten a green sea turtle, eventually he would have sized out. We would have it given to a bigger organization. As it is now, this will be Kale's permanent home. Man, and we could not be happier to have him here. One quick word about his name. We did not pick Kale. Kale was his given name by the aquarium. Aquariums, come to find out, are much like the National Weather Service on naming hurricanes. They run through names and they get bored. They've got to come up with ways to name them. This particular set of turtles, they were all named vegetables. And we got Kale. There was another turtle at the same time that they decided was releasable, and they let him go. We could have ended up with him. His name would have been Broccoli. I don't know that's got the ring to it that Kale does. We might would have shortened it to Bro. I don't know. We would have come up with something, but we're thrilled to have Kale. He is a beautiful turtle. If you look very carefully, and we tell his story on an interactive exhibit we've got in there in the aquarium, you can still see the scar on his neck. But bless these turtles' hearts, many times when they are a rescue like this, it is a rescue that they got that way because of a very traumatic event in their life. They would have had a run-in with a shark or a run-in with a boat, and the turtle would have been disfigured in some way, missing a flipper, something like that. Man, Kale looks wonderful. He's beautiful. He's very cute. Of the turtle families, this particular species comes across as cute. You guys need to come see him. But that all happened while we were closed. So we had something, not just reopening, but something to be excited about and to promote when we reopened. One tact we took was we were going to hit the ground running again, and we were going to put a smile on this, and we were going to market, we were going to advertise, we were going to add programming. Man, if we were going to go down, we were going to go down swinging. So anyway, the timing of all that worked out just great. We did a staged reopening. We allowed members only a couple of days, opened up the general public by the end of that second week of July, and then opened up. Man, it's been great. That reopening and rebounding, and this is where we're in this boat with everybody else, and different industries have been hit different ways with this. Even once you got to reopen and rebound, it's been different for different folks. It reminded me of a Warren Buffett quote he came up with talking about economic downturns. And I read it and I said, that's appropriate. It'll be okay. If Warren Buffett, the sage of Omaha, said it, we can all say it. Here's his line. He's talking about the impact of economic downturn on businesses. He said, when the tide goes out, you can see who's been swimming naked. I let that one sink in for a minute. When the tide goes out, you can see who's been swimming naked. His point being is, it's the flip side of that would be, every coach that's got a 7-foot basketball player on his team looks like a genius. Yeah, but he's not a genius. He just looked that way because of his team. Things got tough, and that's when you start to see, and you guys have seen it in retail. You look at the JCPenney's, the Neiman Marcus's, some of these that just may not make it through this. Well, it's been tough on everybody. I happen to think, and as an economics teacher, I study this. I think this one's different, and I think this one's harder, and I think this one's tougher. I think it's a vicious cycle of the virus itself, and the precautions and the mandatory guidelines, the way that's impacted business. And then you reopen, and then the economic reaction and the worldwide reaction, and how it's impacted logistics and supply chains. This has been crazy. I'd like to tweak, if I could, his little phrase. I think this is one where the tide went out so violently, it ripped the bathing suits off of perfectly clad swimmers. I mean, you were doing a great job, and this just hit you upside the head. So here's what we did. Again, we were going to take a great attitude into this, but the reality was we had to take COVID precautions as the type entity we were. The kind of questions we had to ask, similar to questions everybody else is, what are we going to do? Both voluntarily and mandated type things. Well, what were we going to do there? What was that going to cost? How will those things impact our visitor experience? I mean, you can do all those things and change the feel of the museum. And then finally, and this was early on a worry on most people's part, what about the larger image and perception issues, both regarding what you do and how you enforce it? So all those were questions we had to answer. Well, here's the trick. For us, and I appreciate the testimonial earlier, for us, our pre-COVID reviews always highlighted our hands-on interactive exhibits and our friendly and communicative staff. Hands-on interactive, friendly and communicative staff. Well, great. Now you can't touch anything, and you can't see anybody's faces on our staff. So, what do you do with that? But, when given lemons, you make lemonade. You do what you can do, and you do it the best way you know how, and you do it with a great attitude, and you just got to see what happens. So here's what we did. In the exhibit space, we did take some hard to clean interactives offline. We just removed them. We modified others. For instance, with our sand table, now we give single-use gloves. You gotta sanitize, you do the gloves, you take the gloves off after you're finished, and then you re-sanitize and you move on. And it's working marvelously. Man, we got sanitized stations everywhere. We're cleaning everything much more often. We've got signage everywhere telling folks what to do, what kind of precautions to take. It's hilarious. I stand out front many days and people are buying their tickets. They'll look over at the sign. If they haven't been back yet, they'll look at the sign and they'll see the precautions we're taking. They'll read that we've taken some offline, and I'll hear them say, man, God, we're going to miss the sand table. And that's sad. And the little kid will go, Mom, there's no sand table. It gives me great joy to say, no, ma'am, that sand table is up and running. We've taken precautions. It's going to be different, but you're going to get to use it. And just watch the smile on their face, because we thought we were a way to keep it usable. And that's what we wanted to do. Regarding the staff and masks, we decided to embrace it and have fun with it. I found that if you're smiling big enough under the mask, people can tell and they return that smile. So man, you just got to put the effort into it. You project with your voice with a friendly tone. Man, people are yearning for happy human contact. And we're going to provide that even through the mask. We're going to go that extra mile. Our guest services and our gallery explainers are all wearing animal masks. So some of them are cute, some of them are kind of scary, but you know, we're just playing. If we're going to wear masks, we're going to go with the theme. It's worked really well. So well, in fact, we're selling those masks in our museum store. We have sold a ton of those masks, mainly in kid sizes. Little Johnny will see the explainer with the cute mask on. It'd be alligator teeth or shark teeth or a deer face. And they'll get to the store on their way out, and they don't want to wear their ugly mask anymore. They want to wear the mask with the animal face on it. So that's kind of cool. Look, we're all in this together. We're trying to make the best of it. And we found that people respond to that. Regarding some of our other programs, you know, we've got number restrictions. We've got outside guidelines of what you can do and what you can't do. I mentioned our event rental space. You know, pre-COVID, we could put 320 people in there for a banquet. Well, right now with social distancing, that new number is 100. Well, we changed the pricing to reflect that reality. And we've been able to book some smaller events in there that couldn't have afforded that space earlier. We've made it such that it's affordable for only putting 75 or 100 people in there, because we want people coming out. And those that have come out have had a great time. In the exhibits, we've got a number of rooms. Each of those rooms could hold about 90 to 100 people capacity-wise. We had already decided at grand opening, we were going to limit that to 50, which is about half full. And at half full, you can enjoy the place. At full, you feel like you're in a theme park and you're bumping shoulders with everybody. You can't enjoy it. So we had already decided to back that back to 50 people every 15 minutes on our time ticketing system. Well, post-COVID, we've rolled that number back even farther. We've rolled that number back to 30 every 15 minutes, and that's worked fine. By doing that, as you walk through the exhibits, even on the busier times, it allows people to spread out, the family groups to be over 6 feet away from other groups, and people have appreciated that. Obviously, our field trips aren't happening at all at this point in time. Virtual field trips weren't going to work for us. They just weren't going to be feasible. So what we've added now are just classes for everybody. Anybody that wants to come up on a Tuesday, we're dissecting squids. We've added homeschool classes. We're doing bovine eyeball dissections. We're doing weather watchers. We're doing just classes for the community. We started adding after school classes as well. Herpetology was our first one. We did it last week. Man, it was all about snakes and lizards, and it was full of kids, some of whom are doing virtual school now, but some of whom are in school actually, but they want a break. They would come out in the afternoon for an hour, hour and a half after school was over, or at the end of a day of homeschooling or virtual school. They're getting to come to the museum and continue that learning process, but in a way that's fun. All right, so here we are. We ramped up activity level. We ramped up marketing. No, our numbers are not where they need to be, but those folks that are coming out are having a great time. You can love social media or you can hate social media, but one thing it does for you nowadays is you know where you stand with people. Sometimes real time, you know where you stand with people. Our feedback has been so encouraging. Here's what we're hearing. So glad you're open. So glad you're adding programs, and so glad you're doing what you're doing to make it a safe environment. The other piece of the puzzle, we've had exactly zero feedback thus far on the thing we were all worried about at the beginning of this. What do we do with people that weren't going to distance? What do we do with people that refuse to wear a mask? How do you enforce that? You know, do you play the awkward sheriff? I'm afraid I'd be Barney Fife if I tried to enforce that. You know, those sorts of things. You worry about the polar opposites on social media. You know, I can't believe that museum's taking all my freedoms away, all the way to the other end of, I can't believe that museum doesn't care if I live or die. So, I mean, you've got all that going on at once.
That's right.
We've had exactly zero problems with that thus far. It has just been amazing how I think people are just appreciative of having an opportunity to have somewhere safe to go that they enjoy,
right.
and people are following the rules. So it's been great. Well, let me finish up. I got two quick encouraging stories. Just last week, I had the privilege of going to Gadsden for the annual meeting of the Alabama Mountain Lakes Tourist Association to accept. We were awarded the Attraction of the Year award for the Cook Museum, which was just such a great honor from that particular organization. While I was there that day, the presenter that day thoroughly enjoyed listening to her, a lady named Rita Suter. Her theme was titled, "We Can Do It," and it was centered around the Rosie the Riveter theme. And she hearkened back to what we had to do in World War II. And people all, you know, the men folk were all off fighting in the war, and the women stepped up and they built the B-17s, and they built the ships, and we found out we could do things we never thought we could do. And this was her speaking to a group of tourism professionals. And you guys know tourism has been hit hard. Tourism has got a tough road to hoe right now. But man, these tourist professionals, they are tough, resilient people, and they wake up every day with a smile on their face. So she was preaching to that choir about what they needed to do. Couple of things I took away, that this is true for us as a museum, that can be true for everybody. Here's what she said. Number one, optimism is a competitive advantage. Be proactive with it. Stay on the offensive with it. Be optimistic. People need hope. And they need to be, and they are attracted to optimistic, hopeful organizations. Man, put a smile on it, put your best foot forward, and people will respond. Secondly, our visitors, your customers, your clients now have higher expectations than ever. Everything is a hassle now. My office, where my actual office is, I can see our parking lot. Hundreds of times I've seen people get halfway from their car to the museum, turn around and walk back because they forgot their mask. I mean, now that's a little hassle, but that's the world we live in now. Everything seems hard. It is so much easier to stay home, do something online, order something online, have food delivered, not get out. It's just easier. It's a hassle. I'm just happy to have them here. They're not just happy to be here. If they're going to make the effort to come out, I've got to make double that effort to make sure it was worth their while. You know, number three, yes. And I've got to preach this to my people every day. Yes, our guests are doing us a favor. Yes, they are doing us a favor. Rita reminded us all of that great sign at Waffle House. We know you had a choice today. Thank you for choosing Waffle House. Man, that's everybody all day long now. People have choices. That mindset has got to permeate everything we do at the Cook Museum. If we're going to engage, excite, and educate in this current environment, we'd better be exuding optimism and hospitality every day. All right, real quick, one more story. And I know I'm supposed to finish up at 5 till. In 2009, my grandmother called me and asked me if I'd gotten my money out of the bank yet. I said, well, Granny, why would I need to get my money out of the bank? Of course, you guys remember the Great Recession. And she says, well, when my daddy had to go down to the bank to get his money out, they wouldn't give it to him. She was a child of the Depression. She experienced that, and she projected that onto today. I'd never experienced that. I didn't want to explain to her FDIC. It wouldn't have been a good conversation. But, you know, she felt that way strongly because she had to. She had been through that. I came across this obituary last week. It was of Charles Drury. He founded the Drury Hotel chain, right? He passed just a couple of weeks ago at 92. So roughly that same age. He ended up with 141 hotels in 26 states, but that is not where he started. When he was growing up on a farm in Missouri in the 30s and early 40s, in addition to the farm work, he and his father and his brother were plasterers. They put plaster on walls to help make ends meet. Got drafted, went to World War II, served as in the Army Air Corps, was assigned to administrative duties in Guam. Discharged from the military in 1947, Mr. Drury came home by train. His father and his oldest brother picked him up at the train station at 6 a.m. in the morning with his work clothes, and they went and plastered all day. They finally got home after a full day's work that evening to finally see his mom after being in World War II. All right. That's a different caliber human being reacting to different things than I am. I am very soft compared to those kind of human beings. That's the kind of guy that could go from nothing to founding this hotel chain. He was asked one time how his chain survived because it didn't have the national recognition of the Holiday Inns and the Hiltons. This was his response. He was once asked how he could do that. Here's what he said: we're just going to have to get up a little earlier, stay a little later, and work a little harder. I used to think I knew what that meant when things were easy and prosperity surrounded us. Now that we're going through this tough time and running this museum and this tough time, I've got a whole new appreciation of what tough time means. And I do think us as Americans, we've got this baked into our DNA. I think we can step up and make this work. We've done it before. And sometimes these tough times make you into who you're going to be. And I think, you know, we get through all this, we're going to be better people at the end. Let me tell you, thank you for giving me the opportunity for speaking to you today. Come see us, donate to our education scholarships, come volunteer. Maybe you can be the next executive director.
Excellent.
Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Scott, that was a great presentation and lots of wonderful information. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I have one question, Scott, just for the benefit of all the members here. How much does it cost to go see the museum, and how long does it take?
For adults, it's $20, and the next step down, seniors and military, 17, children are 15. I've got 2 granddaughters. One of them reading now. She takes 2.5 hours. My 5-year-old runs at a dead sprint from one fun thing to the next. She's more like an hour. Our field trips are normally to get a full enjoyment, normally, you know, hour and 45, 2 hours. One of the cool things we do, and this was the decision we made at the front end, you go through and you decide, you know what, I'd like to upgrade to a membership, which means you can come anytime you want, as many times you want. We will apply that ticket money you paid that day towards that membership. Our goal when we first started up was to have in force any given time about 2,000, 2,500 memberships. We are now just shy of 4,000 memberships, which is, I guess, a testimony to people go through and go, you know what, we're coming back, and we're thrilled. But it's a fun thing. We add new things all the time, so we give you reasons to come back again and again. It's just not the same old, same old.
All right, any other questions?
Scott, this is Rudy. Hey, sir, great presentation. Thank you very much. I'd just like to add a little bit, another acronym to your grandfather's thought. Get up a little earlier, work a little longer, work a little harder, and a lot safer. I would add an ask to the ELH. Great presentation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to be with us, Scott. We thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and look forward to coming over there to the museum and taking part in it. So I hope, I wish you the best in this week. And we're right here at time for us to close out our meeting today. So I'll share my screen one last time. Let's see, there's one chat message here. Oh, okay. Great presentation. So kudos. I'm going to share my screen now. And we are now ready to do the 4-way test. So if you would, everyone, repeat after me. Of the things we think, say, and do, number 1, is it the truth?
Is it true?
Number 2, is it fair to all concerned? Number 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And number 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right. Thank you all very much for being here with us today. Thank you again, Scott. I look forward to seeing all of you, those who will be on the ramp build, weather permitting. Keep your fingers crossed. Have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.